thank you all for joining me today. Let me get my slide deck up and running. Thank you all for joining at this early hour for probably most of you. For me, I'm in the Netherlands, so it's 2 p.m. already. So for me, it's not a big problem. But thank you very much for joining this session. Before we begin, just some quick notes. First of all, the charity, which will be sponsored by Microsoft 365 Chicago. So if you do want to add that to that charity and donate, please do so. And the link is on your screen right now. Also, please do help us improve our conference. We, as presenters, we learn all the time doing these kinds of sessions. As organizers, we learn as well from any feedback you can give us on this virtual event. So please do supply your feedback for this session and the conference overall. Also, a very big hand to our sponsors, of course, because without any sponsors, events like this are very hard to organize. So a very big hand to the gold, silver, and community partners of this event. And they do have specific rooms in the Teams environment, so why not take a look at their offerings. And while you're at it, you can also collect specific items for a giveaway. So there's a lot of very cool gadgets to be won, like an Xbox or an Amazon gift card. So please don't hesitate and just go to the Teams environment and go to those specific rooms. Okay, having said that, today's session, the first session for Chicago, will be on eDiscovery and Teams. So first of all, I'll introduce myself because I haven't done so. My name is Albert Hoitingh. I'm from the Netherlands, working in The Hague. I'm a consultant on Microsoft 365 and specializing on anything to do with compliance, risk, and security. I'm also a Microsoft MVP on enterprise mobility, mostly related to information protection. So today I'm going to take you through a lot of things regarding Microsoft 365 eDiscovery. It's a complex subject, so there might be stuff or items I won't be addressing in depth in this session, but you're very welcome to contact me either by Twitter or LinkedIn if you have any more in-depth questions. We'll also be looking at the information architecture for Microsoft Teams, because if we want to discover and export information, it's also very relevant to know where Microsoft Teams stores its information, and that's a very complex subject as well. Then we're going to combine the two, looking at how we can recover information which is stored in Teams. For example, if we need to export it, or if we need to redact it, then we're going to look at those two options as well, and we'll see what works and doesn't work. And I'll be showing you that we're using a demo environment, so instead of just talking about the subject, I'll be showing you as well. Okay, well, first of all, let's take a look at discovery or eDiscovery in general. The eDiscovery options in Microsoft 365. What's it all about? Well, if we look at the definition for eDiscovery, and this is the one from Wikipedia, the one I normally use is it's a function to retrieve or search and retrieve specific information in order to either export it or perhaps even delete it, or to place it on a specific in place or litigation hold to be able to recover it when needed. And if we look at eDiscovery, there's a very specific model which is called the electronic discovery or reference model. And this ERDM really takes care of all the phases within eDiscovery. And this is important because this is also how Microsoft 365 offers eDiscovery functions. For example, and I'll go into this in a bit in depth in a couple of minutes later, we have what we call core eDiscovery, which is basically finding and exporting the information, and we have advanced eDiscovery, which is basically a very, well, a workflow-based system to collect the information, but also to process and review the information and then produce the information. Well, as you might notice here in this diagram, you see that the volume of data when starting an eDiscovery might be very high, and the relevance of the results will be very low. Let's compare this to a haystack and a needle, or multiple needles if you want to. If you have a very huge haystack, it's going to be near impossible to find that needle. But we'll see within eDiscovery, and especially advanced eDiscovery, that we do have options to really reduce that haystack to manageable, well, mini haystacks, if you will. So let's take a look. This is the general ERDM model. How does this work within Microsoft 365? Well, basically, we have three options for eDiscovery in Microsoft 365. First of all, we have the content search. And content search, as the name says it already, allows you to search for information using either keywords, search conditions. You can also export the relevant information you do find, but it's really compressed into that small-scale functionality. Based on that search and content search functionality, we have the core eDiscovery function, and that goes a little bit beyond the content search in that it allows you to place information on hold, for example. It also has a small-scale case management function, which allows you to open cases, to close cases, and to assign permissions to those cases, for example. As you will see in a couple of minutes, content search and core eDiscovery are very powerful tools, but they are on the functionality side a bit lacking. So I'll show you that in a couple of minutes. Then we have advanced eDiscovery, and advanced eDiscovery, as you see over here already, goes beyond the core and core eDiscovery and content search. There's a lot of difference between the two functions. First of all, the way it works is worth a term called custodians, for example. It also allows you to retrieve information which might not be stored within the Teams environment you want to search, for example. It can go beyond that. It also allows you to use OCR, for example, optical character recognition. It allows you to have duplicate reduction, etc., etc., etc. It's really it's not just advanced in a name, it really is the advanced eDiscovery function within Microsoft 365. And for example, and I'll show you this in a couple of minutes in a working environment as well. These are the steps for the advanced eDiscovery, for example. So we have custodians for the data. We collect the information we need. So we basically have the information in Teams, for example. Then we're going to review it. Perhaps we're even going to annotate specific information or redact information, and then we're going to export it and provide it to, for example, an external auditor. So these are the workflows which are part of the advanced eDiscovery workflow. And just keep this in mind when we are going to look at content search and core eDiscovery, because those are a little bit basic. Okay, another important part for the eDiscovery component for Microsoft 365 is the licensing bit, of course. And I haven't included all the licensing forms for Microsoft 365 because, well, we need to get on with time as well. So, and it's a very complex subject in its own right. But if we go to the enterprise versions for Microsoft 365, then the E3 versions or modules allow for the content search and the core eDiscovery, and the more advanced eDiscovery or advanced eDiscovery in general is only available in either the E5 versions or in the add-on versions, which is either E5 compliance or E5 eDiscovery and auditing. So with those licenses, you can go ahead with advanced eDiscovery. And before I go any further, I just remember one other advantage for advanced eDiscovery, which is directly related to Teams, and that's going to be and I'll show you that in a couple of minutes as well, is that the conversations from Teams, which we can retrieve, are grouped together as a conversation. and not just like within core eDiscovery as very separate entities, for example. So that's another advantage for advanced eDiscovery. Okay, so this is the discovery bit. This goes for anything, any content within Microsoft 365, in SharePoint, Teams, Exchange Online, you name it. But this session is about Teams. So let's take a look at the Microsoft Teams environment, and more specifically, where does it store its information. So if we look at Microsoft Teams, well, as a platform, it offers a lot of functions. For example, communication, meetings, well, of course, working on documents, conversations, chats, application, forms, you name it, it's in there, and it's well, it's basically the hub for collaboration within Microsoft 365, of course. If we go into the architecture of Microsoft Teams, and specifically where does it store its information, then it becomes somewhat complex. And this is relevant because this we need to know where the information is stored in order to be able to get to that information. So, for example, let's start with documents. Documents are, well, very easily, those are stored in a SharePoint Online site collection. Any Microsoft Teams environment has its own Microsoft 365 group, which has its own SharePoint Online site collection. So there is, that's where you'll find your documents. If you start using private channels, then every private channel, any private channel will have its own site collection for storing those documents. So please be aware of that, for example, if you have one Teams environment which contains 4 private channels, then you will end up with 5 SharePoint site collections. So if you want to retrieve all that information, you're going to need to get all those site collections in your eDiscovery search. Meetings, well, things like call summaries and transcripts of meetings, those are stored in the mailboxes. Those are stored in Exchange Online. That doesn't mean that we can get to them using eDiscovery, and I'll get to that in a couple of minutes, but they are stored in Exchange Online. That's where you'll find your meeting details and your transcripts if you enabled your transcripts, for example. So that's very important. And the nuance there is that where did a meeting start? Did it start in a channel, or didn't it start in a channel? In which case it will be stored in the mailbox of the originating person who started the meeting. And that's also the case. And at the end of the session, I will go back to that in detail for example, breakout rooms. So keep that in mind. Then we have one other category, and that's conversations and chats. Well, chats are really easy. Yeah, any information from a chat will be stored in the mailbox of the user. That's not entirely 100% the case, because basically if you look at conversations and chats within Microsoft Teams, then these are stored first of all in the memory of the device you're using for quick retrieval. And if you switch tabs and you switch back to your conversation tab, you'll see that any conversation you were well, creating at the moment is still there. That's because it's being stored in memory. But once it's being committed, then it's going to be stored in Azure Cosmos database, Cosmos DB. However, specifically for eDiscovery purposes, that information or a substrate of that information is also stored in Exchange Online. And again, for one-to-one chat, that's stored in the mailbox of the user. If it's a conversation within a channel, then that information will be stored in the mailbox of the team. Again, private channels are somewhat different in this respect, and I'll talk about those in a couple of minutes. So we have SharePoint Online. That's where the documents are stored. That's, by the way, where the wiki is stored, for example. We have Exchange Online, where either in the mailbox of the team or the mailbox of the users, the conversations and the chats are stored. Meeting recordings, for example, are also stored either in SharePoint Online or the OneDrive of the person who originated the meeting, for example. So we have a lot of components which make up Microsoft Teams. And well, if we want to well, get to that information using eDiscovery, we really need to know all those locations. Okay, so these are the locations, and I already mentioned this, but just again, meetings are somewhat of a different breed, because we have recordings, transcripts, breakout rooms, and I'll at the end of the session I'll get back to that. Okay, so what is discoverable? We know where it's being stored, but what can we get to using eDiscovery? Well, basically a lot of information is discoverable. So we have things like the content of a conversation or a card, a form, a sticker, specific metadata of meetings. Those are, well, that's information that can be discovered using eDiscovery. Even within advanced eDiscovery, we can get to documents which were linked in a conversation. So not just the documents which were stored in the conversation itself, but for example, using a link to a specific other SharePoint Online site or OneDrive, those are discoverable as well. What is not discoverable is on the right side of the screen. And for example, the names of the channels, those are, well, they're not represented in any of the metadata. So they basically, the normal open channels don't display very well in eDiscovery. Weirdly enough, the private channels do, and I'll show you that in a couple of minutes. Code snippets, if you want to have some code in your conversation, well, you can, of course, but it won't be discoverable in eDiscovery, which is kind of weird and kind of gives a backdoor to people communicating within your organization, but don't want that information to be eDiscovered, which is kind of weird. And I'll show you that by using an example. So over here I have an example, and on the left hand side you see a conversation within Microsoft Teams, and it's this conversation I'll be showing you in the demo later. So I started a conversation on a project called Orion. It's at the top. Someone reacted to that. I reacted back to that conversation using a smiley. And as you can see in the reaction, I just created specific types of content in that reaction. For example, first of all, I have a citation or a quote. Well, as you can see, that's no problem. That's and on the right-hand side, we see the quotation being eDiscovered, because on the right-hand side of this screen, you see the eDiscovery content which was discovered. We also see the document. It's a PDF. It was linked from another team, so I just pasted a link in that conversation, and the link itself and the document itself are retrieved as well. So that's okay. But as you can see, as highlighted with the red, there's two types of information which weren't recovered using eDiscovery. First of all, the reactions, so the smileys wasn't stored basically or it was stored, but it wasn't retrieved by eDiscovery, and also the code snippet. The entire bit in between, Orion is bordered by Taurus on the northwest, etc. That was it was stored, of course, but it cannot be recovered. So please take note of that. So this is basically how you would see your eDiscovery results if you would use advanced eDiscovery. On the right hand side, you'll see the kinds of information which was recovered. And in order to recover that information, we use search queries. And I have some specific items which are very relevant to Teams information. So for example, if you just want to, let me start differently. If you want all Teams information recovered in your search query, then you can easily use the Kind Microsoft Teams. That will retrieve all the chats, meetings, and call information within the search, content search part of Microsoft 365. So that's basically the one-size-fits-all for your search query, for example. If you want to have a bit less content retrieved, then we can use things like the IM kind, which will retrieve a conversation or a chat. Plus, be aware that if you use this one, it will also retrieve any Skype for Business messages you still have within your Exchange environment. So please take a note of that. If we look at things like meeting summary and call summary, then we can get information on meetings and calls, duration, attendees, etc. These can be retrieved separately, but will take more, well, in my case, in my demo environment, it took at least 8 hours to get that information into the search index for Microsoft 365. Other information is really, really quick to be recovered, but these meeting information is really slow to get into the search index. But it's there and you can retrieve it. If you have things like adaptive cards, forms, surveys, etc., these are also recovered using that Microsoft Teams kind search query. And if you look for the app name, which is going to be part of your retrieved content, then you will see the adaptive card and the interactions your users had with that adaptive card. So these are just some of the items we can use for search. And well, I've talked a lot already. Let's just go take a look at a small demo. And for this, I'll just switch to a demo environment. Over here, I have my Teams environment. I have a couple of channels. Also, we have a private channel, and in this environment, I've started a meeting. I also have that conversation you saw earlier, which is the one over here. And well, let's see how it works from a content search and a core eDiscovery perspective. Well, first of all, content search. If we go over here, well, one of the first things you'll notice is that although I have my eDiscovery over here, content search has its own little option over here. So if you're looking for where do I find content search, well, it's over here. So let's say we want to create a new search, and I'll just show you the first screens, and then I'll show you some of the things I already created. So let's say demo January 15, 2000. Oh, so something like this. And then I have my locations. And content search and core eDiscovery really share this template or wizard for looking at the information. So what you'll notice is that I have to really select the Teams site itself, and that's for the conversations. And if I also want the documents, then I also have to choose the SharePoint sites which are connected to that team. So this is a bit more cumbersome, if you will. You can't just select, well, I just want to have that team and that team, for example. You really have to choose which email boxes are connected to the team and which SharePoint sites are connected to the team. So let's just say I'll just go for all, just to show you the next screen. And then we have the search conditions. And well, we can either use keywords, for example, the ones I already talked to you about. For example, in the content search or the core eDiscovery, I'm going to show you after this one, I use the Orion keyword to only get the information for my project Orion, for example. So I can have a list of keywords over here. If I want to, I can add a condition, and then I have a lot more metadata I can use. And one of them is, for example, that where is it? Over here, the kind, the message kind. And if I want to have all Microsoft Teams environment information, I simply say Microsoft. Then it's next, submit, and then the search will start to go. So I'm just going to cancel it right now because I already have I have one over here. And what you see over here, this is just a content search I performed earlier. So it gives me some information on the items which were found, the information which was recovered, and I only have 6 items over here. So let's see if I can review a sample. And this is just basic the content search. So I can see the information, and what you're seeing over here is this is from a breakout room, and like I said, I'll get into that at the end of the session as well, breakout rooms. But what you see over here, I can use core content search to get to information based in a breakout room, for example. So this is just content search. I can also export the information I found. I can export the results. I can export a report on the information I found, and that's basically it. That is content search Again, part of your E3 license if you have that license. So this already is a starting point for your eDiscovery. If you want to go one step further, then we get into the core eDiscovery. And core eDiscovery, like I said previously, enhances the content search by well, having litigation holds functionality, for example, and also being able to well, create cases which you can have active, close, etc. So it's a very small scale case management solution, if you will. In this case, it really is somewhat the same as the content search. So I create a case, and it's over here. And as you can see, I got some more well, options. So again, I have the searches, I have the exports, I have some well, control settings for the workflow basically, but I also have the hold, and I can create specific holds for the information I find using the search. So that basically the most important difference between content search and your core eDiscovery. I won't be showing you this one because it's exactly the same as the search you already saw. So let me just go at a demo over here, and this is, for example, my core eDiscovery I already created earlier based on that project Orion. So here you see, well, the discussion, and like I said, if you look at my well, if you look at my Teams environment, I have a well, conversation over here, I've got a reply over here, I've got some documentation over here, and if you look at core eDiscovery, it gets that information, but not the PDF, because that's stored in a different location, and core eDiscovery won't support that. But I do have the conversation, but every conversation has its own well, its own item. It's not threaded, it's not really well, the user interface really isn't that beautiful if you want to add it. This is a Word document, for example. So but it's there, you can have your information, you can filter it somewhat. So but it's limited, but you can get to all your information within your Teams environment. So these are content search and core eDiscovery. So let's get back to the here I go. Let's get back to the presentation and to advanced eDiscovery, because advanced eDiscovery builds on core and content search as well. And advanced eDiscovery has its own dashboard. And before we go into a demo, I'll just want to show you the components for this dashboard. So as you can see, it's more complicated than the core eDiscovery. One of the things which makes it well, relatively complex is that it uses a concept called custodians. So within advanced eDiscovery, you're going to have a data custodian, and that data custodian might be, for example, well, most probably the owner of the information, which might be a team owner or a mailbox owner or a SharePoint Online site owner, you name it. It's the custodian who's responsible for that data. And within advanced eDiscovery, you can also set up, for example, specific notifications to that custodian that the information is being audited, for example. Well, within advanced eDiscovery, those custodians are added using the data sources tab. So that's where you're going to add a custodian, and you can add even more data sources based on that custodian. You always need a custodian. You can't just, within core eDiscovery, you just can kind of say, well, that SharePoint site and that Exchange mailbox. No. Within advanced, you need that custodian. So that's the very important one. Once we have a custodian, then collections are being created. And that's basically those haste tags I already talked to you about. So you can have multiple collections, and the collections are based on content search as well. So there you're going to search your information. You're going to review it if the content search is correct. So you can run it in a specific draft mode, for example. But do please be aware that once that collection is being committed to the next stage, which is the review set, then the collection will not be able to be modified or deleted. So please, if you make a mistake within your search query, for example, I'll just go back and modify the collection. Well, that's not going to work. You're going to have to create a new collection for that. So please be aware of that. Okay, the review set, well, the name says it all, I guess. Based on the information in the collection, you can have a review set. You can review your information. You can annotate your information, for example. You can select specific items within that collection, which, well, basically need to be part of an export, for example, and then you can export your information. So within the review set, that's the work you're going to do to review your content, working together with several other people, perhaps, to really look at, oh, is it the information we need to supply to, for example, our external auditor, and then, well, the export job can be started. So that's an important part as well. I'll just skip over a couple of the tabs for now, and then go to the export tab, and that's where you'll find your exports. So it's not like sort of like just right click and download. You really select the information you want to export, and then an export job is going to be run, and all your export jobs will be found within that tab, export. I already talked about jobs, a very important one for the advanced eDiscovery, because, and you can see a part of it on the right hand side of the screen. Advanced eDiscovery really takes some time, and you want to really know what's happening within my advanced eDiscovery case, and the job tab is for that. So there you'll find running jobs, the process, but also if they run successfully or if they have failed, and get some status information on the jobs which are part of your case. So this is the advanced eDiscovery dashboard. And before we go into that in the demo, just some information on exporting the information. There are some differences between the core and advanced functions. In the core eDiscovery, you basically just get a zip file with all the versions, for example, of the documents, and all the conversations within a Teams environment will be stored as separate message files. So which you can either get into a PST or in a zip file. You do have some options there. But looking at the advanced eDiscovery, we get a threaded view of the conversations. So you get an HTML file per conversation. So you get the entire thread of the conversation, for example. If you use things like redaction, for example, over here, you get the redacted information. So if you have a Word document which was found, you can redact it, and then the redacted PDF is exported. But you can also choose to export the original as well. So there's a lot of options, and again, advanced eDiscovery really goes beyond the basic functions for core eDiscovery. So let's take a look at advanced eDiscovery, and I'll go back to my demo for that. Over here. Advanced eDiscovery, as I stated earlier, works with cases like core eDiscovery, but goes beyond them. I already have some over here, and I'll just go to one in a couple of minutes. But I'll just show you the steps if you create a case from scratch. So let's create a case. Let's call this one again. I'm not that handy with names, so let me call it. And as you can see, I can have more information added to this case. I'll select, I'll return to the home page. The case format has been changed since the last couple of weeks. This was a preview function, this one, and the classic was the default version, but now Microsoft has switched this around. So now you, well, per default, you go for the new case format, which supports those conversations collected as HTML, for example. So that's really cool. So let's create this case. Oh, okay. I'll just create a case again. Oh, just one sec. Fortunately, I already have some available. Why doesn't just one? Just go like this. Okay. It's in Dutch. And let me see if the system accepts it right now. I think it probably will. So there he goes. Okay, so one of the first things we need to do when we have this case, and there's more things we need to do. Of course, we need to have the persons assigned to this case, etc., etc. But looking at the data we need to collect, we go to the data sources tab. And like I said, any advanced eDiscovery case needs a custodian. So I'll just add one custodian. Let me see if Peter's still there. Yep, there he is. And immediately it will retrieve the information which is valuable for Peter. So in this case, I get his email box in OneDrive, of course. But in my case, in this example, I just want the information from a specific team, from a Teams environment. And well, here it is, Teams. So let me just go there. And oh, here are the teams which are relevant for Peter. So, and instead of within core eDiscovery, where I really had to have the URL of the SharePoint site and the Exchange mailbox, in this case, I can say, well, I want the operations teams. So I want this, both the documents, which are stored in the site, and I want the conversations, which are part of the mailbox. So I want those. If I want to add more custodian data, then I can either edit this screen, and then the data will be added to the collection in the next phase, or I can add other so-called non-custodian data, for example, a different mailbox or a different SharePoint site, etc. But for now, I want this custodian with this Teams environment. So I'll just go next. As with core eDiscovery, I can choose to hold information, but in my case, I don't want to do that. So I'll just go like this, go next. And if I go, well, if I submit this one, it will create that case for me. So let me just submit it. So the only thing I really did right now is just to, create a custodian which has specific data. And in the next tabs, I can create a collection, which is again the haystack, where we're probably going to find that little needle. And well, as you can see, because of the time, I'll just skip some of the settings right here. But let me just give the collection a name. I can select the custodian. Well, there's just one custodian, so I'll add Peter for this. I want always custodian data. I can add additional custodian sources or non-custodian sources. I can even, this is very reminiscent of the core eDiscovery. I can have additional locations. And then at the end, here we are at the search query. So when we create a collection, it's like core eDiscovery and like content search, it's the location and it's the condition. So let's say in my case, I want to retrieve any Microsoft data, and I don't want to have any keywords. I just want the message kind to be Microsoft Teams. I go next, and this one is very important. So please be aware of this one. Right now, I can save this collection as a draft, which means I can go back to the collection if I made an error in the query, for example. I can, for example, add it to a review set if I'm happy to do that. But please be aware that if I add it to a review set, then the collection is committed, and you cannot modify the collection afterwards. So please be aware of this. So if you're not really sure if the collection is the way you want it to be, then just save it as a draft. You can have things like example information retrieved by the collection, so you can get an insight into what the collection will look like, but commit it only if you are satisfied that it really meets your criteria. So if you do, you can, as you can see over here, you can collect all versions of SharePoint items, which basically, as it says, it really will retrieve all versions of a specific document within your eDiscovery. Please be aware that Microsoft does have 500 version standards within a library, so that really might take a while before all that information is collected. So these settings are very important as well. So I won't continue in this one because I already have one over here. This is the, if we're going to look at review sets, this is a preview set. So here I have my information, which was, is part of the collection. I have a lot of information over here. I've got some Let me just scroll a bit more here. I've got conversations, I've got emails, I've got documents which were part of my my search query. And well, one of the nicest things within Advanced eDiscovery, I get a threaded look at those conversations. For example, this is one in a private channel. You see, I started a conversation, Connie reacted to it with some GIFs and some information, and that's all being collected, and I can really basically just export it if I need to. I also have documents, for example. Here's a PowerPoint, and there it goes. And as you can see, Project Orion, I have the metadata. If I want to, I can annotate the document, in which case, when you annotate a document, it will be stored, and you really have to create a processing job to convert that annotated document to a redacted PDF. So if you don't do that, then the annotation won't be processed, and you won't be seeing it when you export that information. So please be aware of that as well. So let me just redact a little area, for example. Well, if you look very carefully, you'll see redacted over here. It's just a little block. Well, some other things we see over here, for example, here is that meeting information I already talked about. So I've got the meeting details, people joining, people leaving, other information. So that's being retrieved as well. So again, if you look at core eDiscovery and you look at, this is the core eDiscovery and the advanced eDiscovery for Teams. Yeah, it really goes beyond just simply retrieving that information. If I want to export information, that's no problem. I'll just say, well, I have this threaded. I want this document as well, this document as well. I've got a wiki page over here as well, so I want that as well. And then I can say export it, and then the export job will start at the back end, and when it's finished, I can export the information. Okay, so that's basically this demo. Let me just looking at the time. I'll just try to wrap up my my presentation. So that was advanced eDiscovery, but like I said, I wanted to talk about breakout rooms and private channels as well, because Teams, like I said, is very complex on the information architecture side. We've got documents, we've got conversations, and we also have relatively new breakout rooms. You start a meeting within your channel, for example, and you have multiple people. Then you can start, if you're allowed to, you can assign breakout rooms, and those are little meeting rooms, and then you can get back to the main meeting after a certain time. So what about the information in those breakout rooms? Well, first of all, if someone shares a document in the breakout room, it will be stored in the sender's or in the originator's OneDrive. So again, a different storage location. The chats are stored in the sender's mailbox, or the substrates of a chat. So you also need that mailbox for that sender. If a meeting, a breakout room meeting is recorded, then the meeting recordings will be stored in the OneDrive of the person starting that recording. So please be aware, another location if you need all that information in one eDiscovery case. It can be recovered, as you have already seen, but it's complicated. Private channels are complicated as well, because, well, first of all, those documents are stored in a separate site collection. Fortunately, those can be found relatively easy. If you use advanced eDiscovery, they can be added to the custodian data source, for example, or as a non-custodian data source, and then the documents will be retrieved. That's really not a big of a problem. And if you look over here at the screenshot, you'll see that I've got a Teams Day Online demo private channel. So the channels are can be found within the eDiscovery content as well, because the name of the channel is added to the content. Conversations are a different matter. Conversations are stored in the mailboxes of the private channel members. And because anyone can start a conversation in a private channel, if you really want to have the full discovery of all the information, you really need to include all your private members, that's not correct, all the members of the private channel into your eDiscovery case. So please be aware of that. Private channels and breakout rooms really make eDiscovery, well, relatively complex. So having said that, I won't be showing you the private channels a bit because, well, we're basically nearly out of time. I just want to wrap up with a couple of comments. Again, if you look at advanced eDiscovery, if you look at collections, once they're committed, they cannot be rerun or edited or deleted or whatever. So please be very, very careful with those collections. Again, breakout rooms, private channels. If you do have the need for eDiscovery in an environment which has breakout rooms, private channels, please be aware of all the locations where that information might be stored. Unfortunately, right now there's no really a just one button you can push to get all that information in one location. If you do include email boxes in your eDiscovery, please be aware that if you don't exclude email messages themselves, those will be included in your content search. So that might clutter the information, so please be aware of that. And also, please be aware of the permissions you need. In my demo environment, I've got all the rights I need to really show you everything, but if you really go all the way with eDiscovery, please look at the role-based access, the compliance manager roles, the eDiscovery manager roles, the case manager's roles. There's a very stringent permission model for using eDiscovery, so please be aware of that as well. And to end this slide, there's some advanced settings which I didn't show you or didn't talk about, but advanced eDiscovery allows for stuff like predictive modeling, which allows you to well, basically have that haystack and use machine learning to really identify specific types of content in order to really get that haystack really smaller for you to search your information. Another thing, encrypted documents. Please be aware if you're using sensitivity labels and information is encrypted, documents are encrypted, that core eDiscovery or content search won't, at least for now, won't be able to decrypt those. Advanced eDiscovery does have that option, so please be aware. There's some other things, compliance boundaries, for example, so you can set specific boundaries. So let's say you have a large organization and you don't want your eDiscovery to be run for the entire organization, but specific boundaries, then those can be set as well. So those are just a couple of advanced settings for, well, basically they're advanced settings for eDiscovery. Okay, looking at the time, it's 5:04. So with that, I want to thank you for well, joining me in this session this early in the morning for all of you. I'm not sure if there's any questions right now which I might be able to answer, or otherwise, well, my details are on the screen right now. So with that, I want to thank you again, and please enjoy the rest of the conference this day for today.
Albert, we do have a question. Give me 1 second. Okay. I don't think so. We have any questions now. Thank you for the session, and you all have a wonderful day ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much.